All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Booth. Today, I'm sitting down with a good friend of mine, somebody who I actually had the privilege of DJing your wedding earlier this year, Kristin Hubert.
Hubert, that's me. Not officially changed yet, but I have to find my birth certificate first, so then I can change it.
Still looking for that?
Yeah. Oh, life is busy.
Yeah. So on this episode, everybody, as you probably saw in the title, we're going to be covering the topic of financially planning for at least the start and definitely carrying through planning out your wedding day. We have tried to structure out the episodes as we go into stuff that makes sense to worry about when you first start planning out your wedding. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't even think about until it's too late, or maybe that's just both parties don't really worry too much about it, but the financial part of planning a wedding is probably one of the most important, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so.
So, Kristin, just to let everybody know a little bit of kind of why you're on for the financial side of things, what exactly you do in the world of finance.
So I work at Widget Financial. I started back in January of 2016, and I started as a teller, then worked my way up to head teller shortly after that, and then I was in the financial service representative position, which is just opening, closing accounts, helping members out with troubleshooting accounts. I was a loan officer for a while. I think that was one of the longest ones for almost a year. And now I am the indirect lending coordinator. So I indirect deals that we get from auto dealerships, I bring those in and put them on our system, but still very much to do with the loan process and everything. I'm just not directly lending to members right now, but that's what I did for a while.
Wow. Did a lot there.
Yeah, I think it's been 4 years. So
wow. That's a lot to cover in 4 years.
Yeah, lots to learn, and I mean it's been more beneficial for me personally than I ever realized it would have been. So I was happy to have been asked so I can share some stuff, because you see all kinds of things that I don't know sometimes if some things would be common sense in a normal world, or if I know things just because I'm in the financial world. So happy to share some stuff.
Yeah. And like we talked about, or at least we brought it up in conversation before, but it's like, there's not, I mean, maybe I just haven't looked hard enough, but it's not like you can just go to your bank. I don't think any local bank and be like, hey, where's your wedding planning consultant? Like, as far as the finance, right. Yeah.
That's called a wedding planner that you also pay lots of money for, I think.
Yeah. But there's nobody who like, and there's probably blueprints out there, but as far as like just being able to have a resource to go to know how to structure out your bank account to take on what a wedding costs, you're kind of going into it blind. I mean, unless you're fortunate enough to work where, in the position that you have, or really anybody who works at a bank. But like, when I plan mine, I mean, I only know, I know what vendors cost roughly, but, structuring all that out, it's not like everybody, I think, is very, very savvy in the budgeting world like we all would like to think we are. So
yeah, that also comes with a lot of help, from people surrounding you as well, whether you ask for it or they have advice they can give you from their own experiences or anything like that. I had lots of help from my now sister-in-laws that just from their experiences and the planning part. And then my own sister, she had lots of advice to give and lots of help. And it's just through conversation, your things are going to get brought up that you're like, oh, I wouldn't have thought about that at all. Or, I better mark that down so I know that I need to pay for that. Or even just normal things that come up that you're like, I never would have thought that would cost money, or that costs a lot more money than I realized. It's just a matter of figuring out your expectations and where you want things to land when your day comes, and how much you're either able to allow that to cost or willing to let that cost. I mean, it's really what you and your partner want to set up for
Yeah.
as far as how that's going to go. So
Yeah.
communication is also a huge part of that.
Yeah, big time. And we're lucky, I think, in the Erie area. Well, it's all kind of relative, just like any business market, any city you go to. But Erie, at least our area here, it's very rare that you're going to find a wedding that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like if you were to, do a wedding in New York City or someplace, some bigger city like that. So planning for some big things that you can envision or that you want to happen at your wedding, you could probably get it done at a relatively decent cost if the service is available. But like we said, it just all comes down to that planning side of things.
So yeah, and I would say the biggest thing, well, there's lots of biggest things probably, but the just sitting down and having a conversation about what you're willing to pay for things, and then starting to either save up for that or plan that out as soon as possible. And I think your vendors are the first things you want to come up with and reserve, because I mean, even in normal circumstances, people are booked out, 6 months, a year, probably more in advance. So it's hard to, I don't know. For me, I think personally, it would be hard to commit to something like those things super early when it seems so far away. But I think that's what you have to do. So you have to figure out how much that's going to cost, and just figure out your expectations for that. And then you want to have a conversation with the vendors as well, making sure that all of your prices for that are upfront, and that you can attain that goal if that's what you want to do. And then if not, you either let some things go or you just figure out what you can manage, because you have to look at your, I would say basic information is just looking at your bank account, seeing what obviously the bills aren't going to stop. Like, life isn't going to stop while you're doing this. So you need to look at what you have. If you have a savings that you've been saving for a wedding, or just, for life expectations, you figure out how much of that you're going to use, and just figure out what you're going to put aside each paycheck or each month to attain those goals. And then that also plays into your conversation with your family, if they're going to help you pay for some things. Either your family's going to wait for you to come to them and say you need some help, or they're going to be ready for you and say, hey, this is what we have for you, and this is, go wild. So so we had both of those. In my situation, we had both of those. So it was like, all right, this is what you have. And then it was, one side was like, what do you need? And I was like, I don't know. So just writing everything down, figuring out what your goals are, and being very, very, very realistic with yourselves, and just making sure that you don't get in over your head. Otherwise, it's not going to be fun anymore.
Yeah.
So
that's a very good piece of advice to start it off, is being realistic, because with every vendor and every venue that you're going to run into and that you're going to want to book, everybody will let you upgrade as long as you're booked. So have your timelines and everything picked out in advance if that's what you want, but being realistic from the jump, and then being able to be like, okay, well, maybe down the road we have X amount of dollars left over for that idea that we thought about maybe being a cool thing to do. Let's see if we can add that in.
Yeah.
But to start things off from the jump, the first thing that was probably already purchased was the engagement ring. So guys, you know what? You take that one on your own.
Take it for the team.
Take that one. That's out of the equation. You're not allowed to bring that up in the rest of the wedding budgeting talk. Just a heads up.
We didn't know. That was not even included.
But to start out, for a couple that is recently engaged, they're going into it thinking, okay, well, we're going to be doing the majority of this on our own. What is probably their first step if they want to be, if they're starting off being like, hey, we need to stay financially aware of this whole thing. We don't want to run out of money. We don't want to stress about it. We want to plan this out exactly how to avoid all those complications. How do you think that they should go about doing that?
One of the biggest points I wanted to make with that was like I said, getting upfront your quotes and invoices from your vendors to know how much those are going to cost.
Yeah.
Have a very honest conversation with them about their contracts, what's included in that, if they're going to charge you for something down the road, that would seemingly be unexpected if you don't read the contract all the way, and then mostly find out how much is due up front, because once your deposits are in, you can continue to save after
Right.
that. And then, so you just want to make sure you're able to lock those in right off the bat or as soon as you're ready to, because once that's done, then, like I said, you can move forward, but also they're not going to wait for you if you don't do that. So find out what you have to allocate to vendor deposits, and go from there. And again, I'll probably say it a bunch of times, but just be realistic about things. Your bills aren't going to stop. Make sure you have a roof over your head and food in the fridge.
Yeah, yeah.
And continue on. And personal opinion, later on down the road, I also got married in 2020, so a lot of things fell out the window. But it was fine. Like, you get engaged and you start thinking about your wedding, and all these ideas are in your head about what you want to do and this and that, and then it comes down to doing it, and it's either like, that doesn't really make sense anymore, or it's really okay if I don't do that. But then some things you obviously are going to want to do. So again, allow for expenses down the road, or to have some funds available to pull together to make those things happen. But so making sure you have money allocated for deposits, and just getting things started right off the bat so that you can focus on other things after that.
Yeah, because those big deposits are normally what you get hit with first. Your venue, for your reception, of course, and possibly your ceremony. It depends on, if it's a church, you don't have to worry about a deposit there. You're gonna give your officiant, your priest or whatever, something the day of, but you don't have to worry about a deposit with that. But your reception, and if your ceremony is taking place outside of a church where it requires a deposit as well, that's like your first one. And most of the time that's your biggest deposit.
Right, because your whole entire day builds around that.
Yeah.
After that, I mean, once that's locked in, you're building your vision around what that's going to look like inside there. So you want to make sure that that's where you're going to be.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes out of your control if things happen, but that's pandemic circumstances. So I'm going to try not to focus
You might be
too
a little
much on
biased on that.
I mean, we had 3 weddings in our family this year that dealt with all this. So it's just like, that's all I have to go off of.
Yeah. But I mean, you definitely, every time that we spoke, there was like, you had good set expectations, and then you were like, you know what, it's just rolling with the punches. We're doing what we can and what we're allowed to do. But so like you said, those deposits, huge. And those two, from personal experience and just kind of knowing the area, you're talking a couple thousand in deposits between your vendor, like your venue, and your main vendors being your photographer, a possible videographer, and your entertainment, whether it's a DJ or a band or something like that. Those deposits add up to be somewhere around that. So I think, when people are planning, you get engaged and you have your date and everything like that. And or even before you have a date picked out, but you have a rough idea. Like, I want to find whenever this venue can do this, that, and the other thing. And like you said, it's not, if you don't have that stuff ready up front, then if you're planning your wedding a year away, nowadays it's like, well, if you don't have those deposits and everything ready, the likelihood that you're going to get those vendors that you want and that you're hoping for might not happen. So planning, having the conversation, the couple having the conversation well in advance of, okay, how far are we going to plan this out? When do we need to start? Kind of timing that out.
And I think, that goes along with, even if you don't, even if you don't have a date, we based our date around availability of venues, and then ended up finding one in Cochranton that through a family friend. We were very fortunate with the vendors that we found, including you guys. And you just kind of go off of when they're free and what the requirements are, because sometimes it's either that way or you have all the money in the world and you can just throw it at them whenever you're ready. But that's a minority, situation, I would say.
Yeah, that's not everybody is in that. We all wish we were. Shout out to, by the way, your venue, Sunset Ridge out in Cochranton. They're a new place. I want to try and get a venue on here closer to the Erie area first, but I definitely want to get them in here because they're super new. But I think I have like 2 or 3 weddings booked there next year.
Are you serious?
I think it was just from our Facebook post. And,
oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, and they had an open house that I didn't even know about. Well, I knew about after we went there, but they were just throwing one to kind of showcase their spot. And we weren't one of the DJs there, but we got a few bookings off that place. So they're
that's awesome.
Yeah.
We like I said, that was through a family friend, and that barn didn't even look like that whenever we booked with them. I mean, I was like, this is a big, huge open space. And I mean, this is pre-pandemic too, so we weren't even concerned about that, but it was just a big, huge barn with the area. And we were like, this is great. And I mean, because we got engaged at the end of July, started calling places, I would say a couple weeks later, and everyone was already full up here. Yeah. But I mean, it worked out, as well as it could have, because the property owner's son and his girlfriend took over, running that place because they decided to make it a licensed venue and everything. Yeah. And they just transformed it. It was, beautiful. I mean, that really kept me going throughout the whole year because she would put pictures up and send me pictures. And I'm like, I cannot wait to have our wedding here. It was so gorgeous. And the view there over the cornfields. And I mean,
it was one of the most liked pictures and posts.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And it's one of those spots I'm like, people are like, oh my God, where's that at? And I'm like, well, it's a little bit away.
Where Cochranton is?
Yeah. It's out there, but it's not that far.
No.
And I mean, you could do there was a shuttle you could potentially run to a hotel.
We were going to have one lined up. I mean, I had a conversation with, again, the people that own the bus company down there that drove me to school every day. Mm-hmm. They were willing to set that up, and they've done that before. But there wasn't enough people staying at the hotel to do that. But that was, it definitely would have been an option.
Yeah.
But otherwise, good old Uber and Lyft are out there as well. But
that's another good point to bring up about planning this out too, is when you lay out planning out your wedding day and everything that you need, if you do have a family friend or a friend of somebody who you think might have a hookup or something like that, it'd be a good time to possibly reach out, like you said about the bus driver or something like that, because those ways on saving money, they can come in handy because, you always have that friend who's like, hey, anything I can do to help, when it comes to, they saw you got engaged or whatever. And then you remember, they have they're like best friends, like one of the big photographers in Erie, maybe they can refer me and we can save a little bit or something like that. So taking advantage of those potential, referrals or whatever you want to call it, that's a good thing to, I guess, be mindful of too.
Yeah, that wasn't our whole deal, but we had our photographer, Curtis Wadley. He
was awesome.
Amazing. He and Trisha were so much fun to hang out with all day. I couldn't have, and they were actually the third photographer we ended up with because of the first 2 not working out. So it was 100% meant to be. Yeah. But he was referred from a Erie photographer, and I had looked at his site and liked his work, and I just reached out, and he's in Florida now. But wow. he was up here. He had all kinds of shoots lined up, and just made a month or so out of it, and being up here. But yeah, that was all connection, and just just being in Erie. He was willing to come up and do that for us, and then come up and then go back down all the way to Cochranton to shoot that. So that was a couple miles away from where I grew up. It was just crazy that all that ended up being there. But
yeah. And that's the other thing too, is Erie's a small enough town where, likely that you'll be able to find some referrals on some things that people might be able to, if they know your budget that you're working with, hopefully can send you in the right direction to somebody that can fit that.
And that's one thing too with, just being lucky to be in an area like this, because things are reasonable here, I would say.
Yeah.
I looked at like one or two places just outside of Erie area or even just across into Ohio, and it was like on their sites for like 5 seconds, and I was like, that there's no way. Like
Yeah.
I'm not,
Yeah.
it's just not even that like we can't do that. It was just I don't want to do that. Like, you find out pretty quickly what's within your range and what's justifiable for you.
And when you go to weddings and you see, you might see a vendor that you're like, oh, yeah, for sure, we want them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you got to do your research and find out if it's something you can afford. But you also get to know, okay, well, I know what I saw. They cost this much. And then this person is saying they cost this much. And it's like, well, it doesn't seem like they should be charging that much.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other research part of going into it that you need to be mindful of.
Yeah. You're going to spend more time than you realize just reading reviews or comparing vendors as well, obviously, and then making sure, I don't know, I guess making sure you're getting what you're paying for.
Yeah.
And then if you are saving money, I know you guys brought up in an earlier episode, a friend of a friend can do this for you.
Yeah.
And, and you just make sure that's clear with everything that you're getting. Mm-hmm. And, don't be afraid to do a little bit of a written agreement, even if it is between friends or something.
Yeah, you should definitely. I've heard horror stories before of people like, oh, they had to back out because of this or that, and then they're left without a DJ or their photographer or something. Is like they have to then scramble, and that's. Yeah. I
mean, there's going to be scrambling either way.
Yeah.
But that's not, making sure you have your vendors lined up is first and foremost. And that's another thing with just getting deposits down early and getting that lined up, because then it's more stress off your shoulders and you can worry about the more fun stuff like your wedding outfits and your bridal party gifts, and which are also going to add up way quicker than you realize. But
that's another thing too, is one of the other first things, which I think I'm going to do my best on this show to not to try and be mindful of it, but it's like, I'm a guy with a guy's mind and don't think, oh, well, you got to get your wedding dress and your bridesmaid dresses fitted pretty early to when you're getting started. So what does something like that cost around roughly?
So when I was picking out the dresses I wanted my girls to wear, there was absolutely no need to have them pick from some elite place or, whatever. They're already committing to going through all this with me, and little did my girls know what they were signing up for. But luckily, my sister-in-law, Molly, also got married this year, so we were both just going through it together. I just found a site with reasonable prices, and it was oh my gosh, Birdie Gray, I think. There's so many sites, but it was specific to bridesmaids dresses and different styles of that, so they're not charging a crazy amount for those, and they had sales all the time, and that really wasn't, like, I wanted the dresses to be specific in color and sort of style, I guess more or less length. They picked their own styles, but that was not the biggest priority to make them pay all their money for those. So that was around, I'm gonna say $100 each for them, and it's, and then it's up to the bride and groom or whomever to, if they're paying for that, or if your bridal party is okay with paying that themselves. Another conversation to have, just because you don't want, you just don't want it to come up to that, oh, well, you're getting that, right? And it's like, well, no, I'm actually paying for a million other things, and it's just making sure that's clear up front. And, and then with the bridesmaids, it was not only the dress, it was their shoes, it was jewelry that I didn't require them to get any specific kind, but of course, that goes into that. You want a pair of nice earrings or a necklace or whatever you normally wear to go with that. And then for the day of, the hair and makeup. So that's another thing. Are you paying for that, or are you having your girls pay for that? So just another thing to allow in the budget, making sure you're accounting for when you're putting money aside or when you are looking at the overall scheme of things. And then Jeff's guys rented suits, and I think that's pretty reasonable when you rent I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't look into
Yeah, it
that too
wasn't-
far. I was like, those
I
look
don't
good.
even remember. I mean,
Men's Warehouse.
yeah, that's where we both went. Men's Warehouse, yeah.
Us both.
Yeah. And it wasn't bad. I don't even remember. And a lot of those places, they like give you incentives too if you're the groom or the bride of like, oh, yeah, if you have this many guys, you can choose this. They got all kinds of incentives and stuff.
Well, and now they had, you can rent things online. You can put outfits together and rent them online. And the one I was looking at was, you know, I guess it also depends on the size of your bridal party, but it was like, buy your groom's outfit here and get a groomsman outfit for free or something. But we did like 2 trial orders for those sites and they were all wrong. So I was like, we're gonna go ahead and not stress ourselves out with that. But yeah, I don't think they were, our groomsmen were, I think around the same price as the bridesmaids, if not maybe a few dollars more, which I would have never guessed that they would cost a little bit more. And Jeff's tux was a different story, but that's the same thing with my dress. You know, that's obviously going to cost more.
There's a little more of a premium.
Yeah,
on that.
right.
Yeah.
He had more to his outfit.
Yeah. So I've got like my list here if you guys are wondering what I keep looking at. A couple other things I did want to talk about. So a joint couple wedding account. I've had times where I've taken, payments, deposits and stuff, and it's been a check or, a online payment of what would be a first and last name or whatever of both of the couples. So is that something that you see a lot or that you can do at your bank or at any bank where you can set up like a joint just account for straight up weddings, like your expenses?
It wouldn't necessarily be like a wedding specific account. You would just come in and open an account together, or if one or the other already has an account at the institution you want to have an account at, you have to go in together, but you can go in and add that person to that account and either, I know multiple institutions have special savings or separate savings or whatever they call it at that place to just to put money specifically aside for that. And then that way both people have access to that. And then when you get your checks from the wedding, you can, or even cash too, that way either one of you can go in and deposit that. But then when you take your checks in, then there's no issues depositing those.
Right.
Jeff and I don't have that yet, and it's just like I said, 3 weddings, and those were all in 6 weeks this year, so it's like we had that and then other life things going on, and so there's a lot of like right after marriage stuff we haven't gotten to yet, but
because that's one thing is like before you're married and before you share the same last name, that's something that
that's not an issue.
Right.
Yeah, that shouldn't be. And I'm sorry, that's
that's one thing I was trying to get at.
Yeah,
is that's something that they don't have to worry about being an issue.
No, it shouldn't. I mean, in my experience, we certainly don't require the person opening the account then adding another person to the account to have a specific reason as to why.
Right, 'cause you
unless
can
it's
have your-
that, and that only goes into like if it's a minor or something,
Yeah.
guardianship, but that's a whole different thing. So no, you can both be on an account. I've seen, even business partners without it even being a business account, just kind of opening something up separate to both have access to. And like I said, you can go in and withdraw and deposit at the same time, but then that goes, making sure you're having a conversation about, hey, I took this out today, or, there's apps for everything now, so you can check that. But
those offshore Swedish accounts. So yeah, I think that would be probably if you're trying to structure out a good way to just keep everything organized. If you're about to marry the person, why not have that set up?
Right.
If you can, if it's feasible for both of you to do. It's not something you need to like link a direct deposit or anything to, but just have an account set up where you can, if it's, hey, we're going to put money from each paycheck, or we're going to start piling in money for our deposits that we're going to be needing to shell out here in the next couple months. Like you said, the post-wedding stuff, all your gifts. I mean, versus it being in one person's, unless if most of the time the bride is the more organized one. So,
Well,
hey, I'm just being honest. But that way, like you said, because we ran into that too. We didn't have that set up, and you get a gift, a check gift, and it's written out a certain way. Your bank might not be cool with that.
right, yeah, and it's up to their preferences, and I mean, we ran into that as well because, like I said, we haven't gotten that far yet, and so it kind of we've maneuvered it, but it's
right.
And then, but before that, we while we're transitioning, moving all this money around and getting these vendors paid and all this stuff that came up, we have Zelle with PNC. So
I'm not familiar with that.
I don't think it's specific to PNC because I know I've seen it with other institutions, but it's just a direct money transfer. So,
okay.
I mean,
gotcha.
if one of us had the money from our parents or something and we were using that to pay, I was writing out the checks just to get that stuff mailed out and keep it organized, and you transfer money. It's in your account immediately. So luckily there's stuff like that to keep things, and then you have a record of it and you know where things went and everything.
Yeah. Okay.
And sorry. The one other thing, I've seen plenty of times where people really just don't ever get a joint account. It's just their preference to keep their money apart. And so, something like the online transferring app, or just, you keep your separate accounts, but then open one specific for the wedding. You can use that for the process, put all your deposits in there, and take your money out and close it if you want, But there's really no limitation to if you want to just open up something like that just to keep things organized and saved.
That technology, I tell you what. Screensavers. Who came up with those? I already lost my train of thought there, what we were saying.
Joint couple accounts.
Yeah. So, and that's the other thing is having, it might seem like something, well, if one party or one person of the couple is like, well, I'm not worrying about dealing with any of the vendors, then that's one thing. But if it's something where hey, my, the groom's got a friend that's the DJ, so, we're going to go through the process of booking with him. He's going to be the one to put the deposit down. It's that's just a good way to lose track, I think, having stuff spread around of where money's been going, where deposits went. So,
and if you think you're gonna remember that you paid someone, or that they said that they're cool with you paying them at this date, but then you're not gonna remember that. So if you think oh sure, I'm definitely I'll remember to do that, you're not gonna remember. I mean, at least I wouldn't. So everything was written down. We had Callie's West for our catering, and Nikki there was wonderful. And because I had a million conversations with her once March hit, and we had no idea what we were going to do. And I think we changed things about 4 times just with guest size, and then realizing that a couple of the entrees we picked just did not go together at all. And and she, every time I told her what we wanted, and then she updated it and sent me a new invoice, so I knew exactly where we were at, and we had made a deposit with them early on. And then I think a lot of people, I guess I can't say a lot, I don't know if this is a major preference or not, but we paid a lot of vendors just the day of. And but you just have that money ready. But that's one of those things. It's I
don't think it's a very common thing.
No?
It's only happened a couple times for me personally. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's different for other vendors, but very few.
Oh, it's true.
I mean,
it
could be different. Well, I mean, it could be different with your because it's one of the first things. It's your food. It's that's there's a lot going on. And a lot of the venues too, that's up front. They're well, we're going to pick out, get all this stuff organized, your food, what you want, all that right from the jump, instead of waiting down the road. So when all that stuff's laid out in front of you from the beginning, and maybe it's something that, it's a preference to be well,
that's what I was going to say too, is I would recommend, if you're able and if you are organized enough to have everything planned out and that this is the vendor you want and you're sticking with it, especially if you're planning early on, make a bigger down payment or make it a bigger deposit. Get more of that out of the way,
Yeah.
so there's less to pay. If you are able to pay down the line or something, or make payments along the way too. Just
Yeah.
say, or either if they don't want to accept random deposits from you, just set it aside and just have it ready.
Yeah.
But I think that's way easier and way less stressful than trying to just suddenly come up with it all at once, obviously, because
Yeah.
that's probably not doable in most
Yeah,
cases.
yeah. And when you get like you said, when you get a bunch of minimal deposits out from the beginning, it makes the beginning process easier. But down the road, getting to that last minute, a couple months out, it starts to, wheels start to turn a little bit faster. Then those last minute things pop up where you're like, oh, well, I need to buy centerpieces because I forgot that this venue doesn't decorate those for me.
Right.
So then you're stressing about that. You've got to then design something, come up with something, or throw something together that cost, however many per table.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree on that. Being a little bit more hardy in your deposits, if not taking care of paying it all off. As vendors, I'd like to be able to be like, hey, I book a wedding and they're just stroking the check for the whole thing right then and there. It makes my life easier.
That's clean cut. That's
but
ideal.
realistically, it's, I think, like I said, for the venue, and maybe those beginning ones, those big things that you got to take care of, it's probably a little bit more realistic for that. It's the bigger purchase, I guess you could say, but it's the more important one.
Right,
that,
Right. And I made note of that, and then I was thinking, well, then things happen where you physically can't have your wedding there, or you have to change locations or things like that. So that's just, not so much on the financial side, but just making sure you're reading your contracts and making sure there's clauses about either canceling refunds or negotiating a different day or something, or a different price for a lower guest count, or, so don't shove all that money at them if you do want to get that out of the way without knowing that you may possibly not get that back.
Yeah.
So
a lot of people, I think, have learned that from this year.
And
I've heard some unfortunate horror stories in Erie.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything, but it's very sad when you hear what, some of these fine prints in these contracts result in.
Yeah. And the Facebook groups I was in for other brides, it was just, the amount of lawyer talk that went on throughout this year about, because I understand venues need to make their money as well, but it's
Absolutely.
like, I think people just kind of threw it at them and knew they were set, and then all of a sudden it was gone. So if you have other things that need your attention financially at that point, then it's okay if you don't do that. You can obviously just put it aside, and if save for it later, or just make sure you're taking care of the things that need taken care of first, instead of, like you said earlier, waiting and then not being able to either get that vendor or get that dress or that tux or whatever, later on down the road.
Yeah.
So
because it's all, everybody knows the date. Everybody knows, at least roughly when everything's due. And you can stay as prepared as possible, but there's always going to be something that is kind of pushed to the end, and there's going to be stress, and there's going to be last minute things no matter what. Unless if you have, like we said earlier, you're fortunate enough to just have a pile that you're just taking care of everything with, then good for you.
Yeah.
But
took the words from my mouth.
Otherwise, there's going to be more, not more, but there's definitely going to be stressful things that pop up towards the end that it's unfortunate, but it happens.
And I would have loved to have had everything done weeks, a month or so out, and just coasted on through. But, that's just, before this, I was really just not a very organized person. So this made me more organized, but there was still my normal tendencies where I just kind of was like, oh, I'll totally do that. And then it's 2 weeks before, and it just comes up on you really fast.
Yeah.
So, there's nothing you can do about that.
Right. One thing I do want to dive in, we spoke on it at the beginning, but having family gifting or taking care of portions of the wedding, it's not as traditional as it used to be back in the day, with the bride's father pays for the whole thing or whatever. it used to be. It's not like that nowadays. At least not a lot.
I would say not.
Yeah.
I got a wedding planner, this big huge book, and it was my Bible through the whole year, along with the other 50 million notes and lists I made. But it this whole guided planner where you open it up and it has little pockets for your venue pamphlets, and you open and there's a budget sheet and a guest, all everything, and then it had a paper for who pays for what.
What? Really?
Yeah, for like who traditionally pays for what. And I was laughing. I might as well have just torn the page out. It was I was like, is this from, I don't know.
Frame that. That's like history.
I know. I was like, some of the things I'm like, why are they responsible for that? And why am I responsible for that?
Yeah.
It's just, so that was completely out the window. It was really just based on what we were given, and and then one side kind of helped with all right, we're helping with like, you need deposit money, like this is what we're giving you for deposits, and then the remainder of this. And the other side was more, it worked out pretty well, like half and half, because the other side was what do you need in like the last couple months? I mean, They didn't say, we talked way before that, but it was like, when you need this, you let me know. And then that was very helpful. So, so that's what I wanted to say too, was when you are having that conversation, which is better to have sooner than later with family, if that's appropriate for your situation, I would say, just let them help you. Don't be afraid to say, hey, this is when this is due. Like, can we split it? Or do you have, because I don't know what other families' situations are, if they just give it to you all at once, if they just give you money. They give you an allowance basically, and we'll give you this when you need it, and they write the checks for you, or what?
You see a lot. Sometimes you see that the parent, whoever, they want to be there when you sign the contract. They want to review everything, be at the meetings, which is totally fine. But you have, it's approached a lot of different ways. Yeah. So, like you're saying, having that conversation from the beginning. Yeah. And knowing where they stand, if they're willing, knowing that, so you can prepare your finances for the other things just as early. I think that is
right. Yeah, let them know what your wedding vision is, and keep that line of communication open as well, because they deserve, if they're going to help you, they deserve to know not where everything's going, but just with when they're expected to have that, if that's what they're offering. So, I think it goes either way. It's either we're going to help you with this along the way as we have money, or I've had this ready, forever. Yeah. So I don't know how that goes, but just, I just keeping that line of communication open and being honest, and so that it's less stress for everybody. Yeah. That's really the main point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing it all kind of boils down to is the financial side of wedding. It's stressful. It's personal too. It's not something that is a big open conversation for everybody to be able to, unless, like we said, you have a big pile of it and you're cool to just be like, oh no, we just paid for everything. We're fine. When the stress side comes into it and you're really worrying about how and when we're going to be able to pay for something, a lot of the times I think people will stay quiet, and the communication might just be between the bride and groom, which is who it matters to. But when you have the assistance and you have family who are willing to help, or friends who had experience with their weddings, or family members' weddings, and being able to know, okay, well, maybe we need to address a lot more things now at the beginning, or this is how we can structure out the remaining portions of it. I think that stuff needs to be a bigger issue, bigger
piece
point
of the conversation.
Yeah.
And it's not like I don't think it, for me at least, not a casual conversation. It's weird, I think, as grown adults being like, hey, mom and dad, like, I don't know. That's just personal, but
like, oh, can I have a $5 for lunch anymore?
Yeah, right.
Like,
can I have 5,000?
Yeah, I need $5,000 next week to put down on this place.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing with just being open with them about it, because it's, and that probably will still happen. Like, oh my gosh, I forgot this deposit was due. I totally just paid for the caterer, something. Because, things happen and you're not, so.
Yeah.
The more prepared everyone around you is, I
Yeah.
think that works out better.
Absolutely. The last thing that I wanted to touch on, which is something that you'd want to worry about at the beginning, but doesn't happen till the very end, is your honeymoon fund. Mm-hmm. That is something that is a very exciting part of the wedding, the honeymoon, which I'm actually going to want to reach out to Michelle or Mark about having them come in and talk a little bit on honeymoons.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
He's got the hookup.
Yeah. We've got the honeymoon plug for anybody. But just the honeymoon fund, kind of just like anything else, a piggy bank, I would think, right, is probably your best way to just an adult piggy bank, aka a bank account. But having that, knowing what you're going to be paying for that, because that's another couple $1,000s we're talking. That
at least,
and
maybe even just in travel.
And some people, they'll rely on those wedding gifts, the checks or cards that come in. And if you want to go on your wedding day or the day after your wedding, sometimes it doesn't work out that well. Right. So you need to know, I would think, with your travel agent, however, be well aware of what expense is going to be coming after the wedding. There's a lot that come after the wedding, your thank you cards, those kind of things. But that honeymoon, which everybody gets so excited about, don't lose sight of that.
So I think maybe it's up to you what you're using your wedding money for, but also relying on that specifically probably isn't great. And then if you get more than you expect, then that's great too. You can put it towards something else or upgrade your honeymoon. Yeah. Upgrade your plane ticket or something.
First class.
We created one on our registry, and that was fun to see people, even if like something's not speaking to them on your registry, they can throw money in your honeymoon, and that's great. And, or they just want to do that in general, which is a lot of fun. And then, I would just make sure with everything else, making sure you're putting money aside that is able to adhere to your budget and live up to your expectation, whatever that is allowed to be that's within your range. Because when this all starts, your imagination's going wild with everything that you want to do, and then you really sit down and write everything out, and it's just maybe that's not it.
Yeah, there's a lot of zeros.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and I think. And that's okay. There's a lot of things that just end up not being that important to keep around, or just the littlest, tiniest details that you no longer find important to you. And then, you can put that towards something else. So, I guess that's more personal opinion I have on that, the financial expectations.
Well, no, but it's, you're right. And, having all these hopes and dreams and then figuring out what that costs, there's a lot that you look at there and you say, wow, there's no way. But when you take those steps from the beginning, you may just be able to make that happen.
Right. So. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be right after the wedding. Everyone wants to be swept off their feet and go right after you get married. But I think after all that, you deserve to go on a nice trip or whatever it is that you're planning to do to celebrate your marriage. Push it back, like do it like when you are comfortably able to, and when it's affordable. Yeah. And and just go with that, because deserve it after all that stress and planning and then after all that stuff is done. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, great, Kristin. I think we covered a lot there.
I think we
did. A lot of good pointers, a lot of good personal advice and everything. I think everybody will enjoy this one. In general, early communication, a good joint bank account's not the worst idea.
No.
And, being aware from the beginning of what you're going to do with those big initial, either paying it off or big down payments, your family. All those things kind of tie in, and a lot of it's no-brainers, but being aware, I think, of the financial side of a wedding from the jump is your best way.
Yeah, and it'll help things be that much smoother throughout the process, and that way you're not disappointed when something elaborate isn't able to happen, or where you're determined and you make it happen. There's nothing saying this might try not to be negative about that, like you can't do everything you want to do, but you just have to be realistic about it. Set your expectations with your partner to make sure that you are able to pull off whatever it is that is very important to you to have on that day, whether it's the DJ or band you've always wanted, the venue you've always wanted, the dress, the whatever, the outfit you've always wanted. And just be honest with yourselves and each other to make sure that that is all set up front. And I mean, you're not going to have your numbers. You're not going to set a date and be like, okay, and this is exactly what our budget is.
Yeah.
You have to have an honest conversation about that and make sure that it's doable. But, and then one thing I want to say about the checks, the wedding money, common courtesy, don't wait too long to cash those checks. It's like, I just from seeing it at the credit union, it's like, you can't hang on to a check for a month and then just cash it, and that person's gonna be like, I accounted for that a month ago. That's not, but that's my boring credit union tip.
We can have more episodes just on those little pointer tips.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's stuff I don't know if it's common sense or if it's just because I'm on the inside, with that every day. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, Kristin, normally if it was a business, I'd be giving them, your handles and everything, but just everybody, talk to your bank.
Yeah. Yep. See what they can do for you, because they're more than willing to help.
Yeah.
So.
All right, Kristin. Well, thank you so much,
Thanks,
everybody. Ben. Absolutely. Thank you again, everybody. Beyond the Booth. Make sure YouTube, our podcast, everything. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Like and share it all. We're working on growing this thing, so hopefully you guys are enjoying it so far. And until next time, enjoy, and we'll see you soon. Peace.